Hi, I'm your host, William Laitinen, and welcome to Talent Equals, where we're exploring what talent can mean to you while speaking with the most exciting people in the insurtech and fintech world. However you are listening to this show right now, invariably, you are utilizing the wonder material that is plastic. Plastic has changed the world. Its cheap and adaptive properties make it perfectly suited to a range of important functions. And the story of plastic is a perfect allegory for human society. It demonstrates our ability as humans to be both creative and destructive. And it's through this human yin and yang of potential that the plastic crisis our world faces today is being played out. So faced with tens of millions of tons of waste entering the ocean and landfill every year, what can humanity do? And here enters our guest today, David Katz, CEO and co-founder of Plastic Bank. David recognized the potential of plastic when it could be exchanged for services and goods that people really needed. And when the true value of plastic was recognized, then the entire narrative of plastic as waste could be changed. Plastic Bank is working in developing countries, many ravaged by poverty and resulting pollution, to create a new currency definition. They are changing the story of plastic by enabling entrepreneurial collectors to freely exchange their collected plastic for things such as insurance, food, internet access, clothes, and anything else a normal store would offer for traditional fiat currency. And the resulting plastic can be recategorized as social plastic, sold back into the global supply chain for a premium product which brings dignity while at the same time helping to solve a critical global problem. They are, for this reason, what I would describe as the best type of fintech. Plastic Bank are truly ambitious in reimagining value exchange within an ecosystem in which the individual obtains a much wanted benefit while virtuously creating benefits for the world. This is what fintechs and insurtechs should always be aiming at. And they do this while utilizing simple principles of community-based distribution, and then layering on more advanced technologies like blockchain architecture. In this conversation, David and I explore the philosophical principles needed to change the plastic narrative. We'll also discuss the mindset needed to tackle such a massive idea. And as normal, we'll be exploring what has gone into David's approach to building the team at Plastic Bank, and much, much more. David is a deep thinker, and I feel there is so much more I'd love to explore with him in the future. So I do hope he'll return to the podcast. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. And without further ado, I give you David Katz. David Katz, welcome to the Talent Equals podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Will. Thanks for having me here. It's beautiful.
Man, thank you so much. Well, look, David, I've been a huge fan of what you've been doing with Plastic Bank, and been following your progress with some, interest. But for those out there who haven't maybe been stalking you as actively as I have, maybe you could tell us what Plastic Bank is.
That's beautiful. Thank you for stalking me. There's a bunch of ways to express what we are. I think that, because we're going to set context here later, but we're alchemists. We're modern alchemists. We're using a fourth industrial revolution technology, the blockchain, to transfer what was waste into absolute worth in the world. Well, so what are we doing? How does that show up? We're the world's largest chain of stores for the poor, where everything in the store can be purchased using plastic garbage, like school tuition, medical insurance, Wi-Fi, cooking fuel, everything the world's poor truly need, struggle to afford, now available using garbage would otherwise flow into the ocean. And all that plastic that we collect, we sell to great companies like Henkel and Hugo Boss and Unilever and all kinds. And
Marks and Spencer's, which is an English institution, I think, as well. Right?
That's absolutely beautiful, beautiful people. Sure. So we're the world's largest provider of marine debris for manufacturing.
Wow, really? So the world's largest provider of marine debris. That's a heck of a stat. And so this plastic, I mean, most people are aware, some people aren't, that plastic is a bit of there's an epidemic of plastic waste in the oceans and on land as well, for that matter. So the premise of Plastic Bank is to take that waste and transform it, as you've said, into an asset, right? So you got the world's largest shop for this effectively in developing countries. So where did that idea come from, David? And sort of just talk us through that moment of realization that you needed to do something and how you set about doing it.
Well, we'll take a step back too, because ultimately the mission is to monetize resources. It's to be able to create a platform where every piece of packaging is truly revealed as the high valuable item that it is. I use this story often about walking over a field of diamonds. And if you're to walk over a field of diamonds, you think you've got lots of wealth below you, but you simultaneously recognize that there's no bank that you could spend any of the diamonds at. No one will share anything with you. No one will barter anything with you. They're ultimately useless to you. Even though they're diamonds, they sit on the ground worthless. It's really what we do in communities. We reveal the inherent value in that petroleum resource in such a way that it becomes money for the world. The only reason diamonds, which are not scarce or valuable, is because there's agreed upon exchange methodology for it. By color, by type, by carat, all those things. And so that's what we've done for materials, for plastic. And more importantly, and although we're stewarding the ocean, well, the real ambition here is to end poverty. Because when we use plastic as money for the world, what can occur? How many more children get to go to school? How much less, stunted growth will we experience? How many other, beautiful opportunities can unfold in front of us by using what was waste as money? So that ultimately, I think, is important to communicate. Now, it's been a powerful and profound journey. And the idea came May the 11th, 2013, right before lunch. I was seeking.
You remember it? That's very specific. I like that time.
It was a big moment. I mean, it really was this but I was seeking it. Like, I've always been an entrepreneur. I've never had a job. I've always just been growing and struggling. And, I just have a tenacity and capacity for uncertainty. And in my youth, growing up on the west coast of Canada, began witnessing the degradation decades ago. And I've always been searching loosely for a solution. I then came to a point in my entrepreneurial life where I was exiting a business I was acquired. And in the growth of that, I came to a place where I felt purposeless as well, where my day-to-day, the business itself was taken care of. I had management, there was recurring revenue. But I felt lost. I was empty. And that's really when I began to give myself more into marine debris and the stewardship of marine life. And I attended an event in Silicon Valley that was Singularity University. Maybe some listeners would have heard it. And the greatest minds come together to talk about these transformative opportunities to work on the global grand challenges, those challenges that affect humanity. And one of the seminars there was on 3D printing or additive manufacturing. And I was able to witness a single strand of plastic transformed and turned into a belt, turned into something of value and use. It had this 70s look to it. It was really fascinating. And I said, well, how much does the belt sell for? $80 is the answer. That's fascinating, $80. What's the material price? The material cost? $10. So hold on. The only thing that was determining the value of the material was its shape. And inside of that, I had the paradigm that the reason that there was so much material in the environment was because it was the way we were viewing the material. It was the shape of the material, the bottle, the packaging, that had society think that it was disposable or free or worthless. So maybe inside of it, if we could change the paradigm inside the mind of the person, that shape now means the end of poverty, it means the end of stunted growth, it means the end of inequality, the end of suffering, that could be the nucleus to change. And then the rest of it, of course, was how do we make it into money for the world? Because the poor don't throw money away. So that was the beginning of the plastic bank. But actually, it wasn't the beginning of the plastic bank. Absolutely not. That was the idea of the plastic bank. But, the subsequent thought to the idea was the ego mind. It's an important conversation. I like to have this. I like to broadcast this because I think it's critically important. I had the idea of the plastic bank and all of the noise of it all. It was so loud. So like, oh, plastic, this, that, the other, the hair in the back of my neck stood up and I felt it. I was like, oh, wait, this is something powerful. This is an idea. It'll just be one idea amongst thousands that we need, but this will make change. So the plastic bank was born not in that first idea. It was just the idea. And the second thought was the ego mind that showed up, and the ego is never a friend. It doesn't show up and say, "You're amazing, you can do it." It shows up and says, "What? Who are you? And how are you going to do that? And you're going to build a supply chain and working with the most impoverished people in the world in violent communities, the illiterate, trying to sell to big companies, so many different tasks. And you're going to do international shipping and shipping lines and freight forwarding, and you're going to try to recycle material. You know nothing about anything. It was just all of these loud thoughts. Like, what are you going to do? Put up posters to try to engage the poor? Who are you?" And it was easy at that moment to say, "Oh, it's too big." Where the communication is that it came in the third idea, this quiet, still, conscious moment. It was calm. And the voice just said, "David, you don't need to be that person. You only slowly need to become that person." And it became available for me in that idea. Because you're right, I didn't need to be that person at all. I could get to become it. And I could easily do that. I could learn more today than what I knew yesterday. And I could just slowly be in the application of it all. I could endeavor to learn what I needed to learn. And so that really is where the birth of the plastic bank came. It came in the third thought, the third thinking of it all.
I'm curious about that space that you talked about in the third instance, the space in which you find that quiet voice to find, the true voice maybe, or the voice that's sort of more, How do you get there? I mean, how have you got some methodology for that? Is there some way?
It gave me this. So what I experienced in the end was a moment of consciousness, a moment of an awakening for all of the importance and all of the gift. And, let me communicate that as being a blessing. I received a blessing. Let's call it a blessing. If we want to give it some context, I guess. And that then gave me, because the last thing that I was conscious. The last thing that I was awake when I had this idea. I was so caught in the past, so caught in the story of self, the diminishment of self, who I thought I was and who I wasn't. And so it began the journey of it all. And through that, as I gave myself to it, as I decided, once I had the decision to have this come to life, Providence started to work in my favor, and I started being able and receiving those things, those messages, and I received Alan Watts and Michael Singer and Eckhart Tolle and all of the others that in this powerful place to find a space in between the thoughts in my mind and who I am.
Who is Alan Watts? Sorry, if I'm going to show my humongous ignorance here, my friend. So you tell me, who's Alan Watts?
Alan Watts is also a real predecessor to many of the teachers of today of consciousness. He was popular in the 60s and 70s as a thought leader of consciousness, of awakening, and really being, one of the universe. I got lots of esoteric and kind of woo-woo conversations, but we really are the universe having a experience as a human for just a fraction of a moment. And there's a power in all of that. What I'm in awareness of is that I'm confident that there have been countless amazing ideas, countless, just world-changing, paradigm-shifting, humanity-shifting, society-shifting ideas that died because the person who had the idea was afraid. They felt it was beyond them. The ego mind showed up and said, "You can't do that. Who are you?" And the person believed it.
I think I resonate with that. I think I think for most entrepreneurs, actually, you talked about being an entrepreneur, and I wonder actually if that sort of crucible of, fear and, just giving it a go, but experiencing failure and getting back up again is sort of the crucible of being an entrepreneur.
There's no failure. There's only learning and becoming. That's all of it too, part of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose maybe it's I think there's a kind of a narrative I hear you talking about, David, it's like changing the story. And, I think in all experience in life.
I would argue that it's not about changing the story, it's choosing the story.
Okay.
It's not about, to change the story is to say that I accept some other story to begin with and then I change it. That's not the case. It's just that the way I view life. I view life as being a gift.
Yeah.
I view life as being a process of learning. I view life as being abundant. I view life as being infinite. That's the way that I just show up in the world. There is no choice. Well, I mean, there is choice, but just in the context here, it's not like I had to choose differently. I had to give myself the capacity to say, oh, no, that's super bad and hurtful and it's horrible and stuff, and then I'm going to choose something. No, that's as it is. There's more power in that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I suppose I would counter that. I think for a lot of people who may be set in a narrative, who are experiencing the world in a certain way, and I think that's the point of, only from my own experience of working with, my own development, and many adults have to change their development and they do that through changing a narrative. Yeah.
I agree. Yes. You have the moment to say, wait a second, that was a narrative I chose. Oh, hold on a second. Let me choose something different.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. I allude that the end in mind there is that at some point, as you begin to practice that, you recognize that the first narrative was also a choice. You chose that narrative. It didn't come with a narrative. You just chose it to be a way. And then what happens over the course of time is that your choice changes at the outset.
Yeah. I remember I've interviewed a few entrepreneurs on the show, and one with David Soloff, where he talked about, being an entrepreneur, there's nothing like it. In the morning you can be on the top of the world, but in the afternoon you can feel like you want to shoot yourself in the face. And it's like, and I could really understand it. Half the time I think I'm flying high, and then, a client pulls the rug out from underneath you and you're like, damn, where did all that joy go? But that is an allegory for life in that story. That's an allegory for all of the experiences we have. And I did really resonate with this kind of the hearing you talk among other things, because I'm thinking to myself, plastic, what a horrendous thing, right? But then I think of all the good it does as well. How it's become a sort of a hermetically sealing product, which has allowed for transportation of, kind of medical goods, and, it's lightweight and
space flight and all kinds of stuff. Please, the plastic is amazing.
Exactly, right? Isn't it interesting how I've got it, it's around me always. It's my headphones, it's in everything we're using, but at the same time, it's in the water and it's killing us. And it's like,
so it's not the plastic. Come on, it's the way we view it. It's the way we disregard it. I'll ask the question again. If every piece of packaging or every piece of material you saw was $5, how many would you see in the environment? How many would you see in the water? No, none.
Yeah.
It's zero to do with plastic. It's not the plastic degrade. It's us and our carelessness and our lack of value over people and thing and life. And really, people know that it's degrading to the environment. They know that it's killing, the gift of marine life, and yet they still discard it. It's us, man. It's got zero to do with the material as it does anywhere else in the world too. It's just so easy for people to want to blame someone else.
Yeah, that's a good point to raise, actually. And you did say in one I listened to one of the other presentations where you talked about this idea of turning off the tap.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting story, because I hear in this that if we just stop producing plastic, which we could, and we have enough of it to probably recycle into everything that we need anyway, which goes to that point of we could still use plastic, but just use it in a way which is responsible and it is, treats it with the value that it has.
I really believe that, in a lifetime from now, we're not going to be taking material resources or like this petroleum resource like the plastic, and we're not going to be putting it on the curb and someone's going to be taken to a landfill. It's not going to occur. Humanity is going to return all of that material as a resource into manufacturing. Of course, that's what's unfolding. Of course it is, just like the electrification of cars. See, once you have the awareness, once you've driven an electric car, you would never go back to the other way. Why? I would never drive a combustion engine vehicle again. Ever.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I still talk to, I've had a Tesla now for about 3 years, and it's completely changed my perception of driving. And I have to explain that to other people. Like my concept of driving has entirely shifted in only 3 years, like what it should be. And it's still like, I see people living in almost like a different world when their view of driving, but that will change. And I suppose this is the same thing about plastic, right?
We can't condemn the ignorant. But knowing and not doing differently, that's a different conversation.
Well, I suppose that brings me to a question I have for you, actually, because, observing what Plastic Bank is doing, and, you work in some of the most deprived places in the world. I remember watching about Haiti, and it was one of those examples where you have these collection stations and people can bring along their plastic, and you mentioned exchange them for other goods. So you're helping those sort of local plastic collecting entrepreneurs to sort of change their life by, giving them a commodity to shift for other products. And, for my audience who are in fintech and insurtech, we've talked about insurance and insurance solutions for these people to give, which is amazing, all through plastic. So we're talking about changing their lives, right? But then there's also like the people who are buying this social plastic or this responsible plastic, right? I think you call it, what do you call it? Social plastic, is that right? Yeah. And people here, like rich people, like in developed countries, who may feel like, oh, I know plastic is bad, but like it's easy, right? Or they feel like it's just easy, and I'm throw it away. So sort of, what do you say to that paradigm for them, like exploring that, like a sense of overwhelm with the problem and being part of the solution? Do you have something to say to them?
I have a hope for the next generation. I have a knowing that this Greta generation, this one that sent tens of millions of students out into the streets around the world, are not going to be doing business with organizations that will continue to kill or pollute. The change is coming, and it's coming not from within. Now, not only do I see this wave of change for business, this regeneration economy, but it's in part supported by the polluter's inability to hire quality staff. We see a whole generation wanting to live their life of purpose. Thankfully, we're at a place like that. I only express those because, I love the saying that a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Do I have anything to say to people who are still polluting and consuming and all the rest? No, because I can't convince them against their will. I do not need to convince the Greta generation. That's why we see the proliferation of used clothing stores and everything. We see a change emerging. Are we another generation away? Probably. The world is going to be fine. It was Earth Day yesterday, and I hesitate on Earth Day because I just feel that it's just so, I don't know, it seems to be ironic. Because it's not about the Earth at all. The Earth is going to be fine. It's been spinning in space for billions of years. And it'll be way better when we're not here. It's not Earth Day. It's Keep Humanity Alive Day. Out of the 10 billion species that have ever been on the Earth, we're the only species that has the ability to steward all other life.
Yeah.
Only species that's ever existed that has that power, yet we don't do it. We act like a virus. Earth Day, please.
Yeah, it's Get Your Shit Together Humanity Day, maybe.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
It's not quite as punchy as Earth Day. Maybe I need to work on the...
Unshareable, right. But with Effed It Up Day.
I feel this because, I did plastic free. My wife and I did plastic free for, I think it was about 8 months.
That's awesome.
It was hard. Oh my God. It was expensive. It was like relentlessly difficult, but it was quite rewarding as well. But we have slipped out of that now because it was very difficult to maintain at 100%. So we had to scale it back. And then the pandemic hit, and what was previously able to purchase has disappeared because everything got wrapped in cellophane as soon as it happened. And it was really difficult. It was really, really difficult.
You don't even need to do plastic free. You need to do waste free.
Yeah.
So just ensure that everything is recycled. It goes to the right spot. It's not about the plastic. Like, I get it. And yes, we need to be able to reduce as much demand on single-use material as possible. And we need to walk into a store and demand that they use less of that and that they have more sustainable and regenerative products and packaging that's recycled and all the rest of it. But I think it's futile. And forgive me, I cut you off a little bit. I react to that because I hear it all the time. It's like, no, we have to eliminate plastic. Well, good luck. There's 10 trillion kilos in the earth. And if we remove all economic value in the material, we're effed. If we remove all economic value in the material or we replace the material with something else and we don't go and collect or recycle any of it that's out there, then we're doomed.
Yeah.
So it's waste-free, not plastic-free that I advocate for. But those are just my personal opinions.
That's an interesting point, and I take it. And I've got to be honest with you, like the paradigm for me was I just felt like there's a tsunami, and my way to react against it was to just try and, do my bit. And I think my wife, as infinitely wise as she is, said, I think there's probably a better way to do this where we could be moderate our intake and then sort of, advocate for the things that we're talking about, just be waste free,
right?
Much more wasteless. And I get that. And I think that's actually kind of, I think where I come back to this point that we're talking about and this idea of like paradigm shift for humanity, how we, really change our perception of how we should act, how we should be, and what we're willing to accept and what we're not. And that is like, that's why I really admire what you've done with Plastic Bank, because, I stood, last year and looked at this problem and felt hugely overwhelmed and did my bit. The way I could do it was to sort of go through a bit of, hair shirt. That was me. Plastic free, damn it. I won't be part of the problem. But you've kind of set a plastic bank, and I think that's fantastic. And it's a different type of sacrifice. So I suppose like I sort of want to sort of steer this a little bit now, because I'm fascinated by, founders who are encountering these like huge, enormous problems. And we've talked a bit about how you've got to still that voice. But I'm intrigued by the partnerships that you've got to create to make it successful. And, I'm serving the fintech and the insurtech world here. And I wonder about these partnerships you have to create and the process you've gone through and how you've gone about convincing people that it's worthwhile partnering with you guys to buy plastic at the rate cost they have to versus virgin cheap plastic. Maybe you could talk to us a bit about that.
We don't.
Oh, good. There we go.
I at first, like, my goodness, it was horrible. It was like, there were some giant FMCGs that spoke about being sustainable. They talked about being leading in the world, but it was just the thin air, the thin words. And so at first I thought that I would just invite them and that they would. But I'll go back to my this little quote that a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. What we're doing now is just finding people who want what we got. I don't have to convince them anymore, and I'm not going to convince them anymore, because there's no end of people who want to make change in the world. There's no end of staff. There's no end of movement. There's no end of consumers that aren't putting up with it anymore. They're making the demand. I don't need to do it. They do. And ask everybody to go into the store, and go into any grocery store, ask the clerk, ask the manager, say, "Oh, could you point out those things that have recycled content in them? We're really trying to be waste free, and I know I got to buy some plastic, but could you show me the ones, because that's the ones that I want to buy? Are you aware of the ones?" And they'll probably say no, but like what? But you created a paradigm for the store manager, for management, to then make a request to the supplier. So the brands. So you're not the customer of the brands. The retailer is the customer of the brand. You're the customer of the retailer. And so the brands will give the retailer what the retailer wants. The retailer will give you what you want. So if you go in and say, that's what I'm looking for, and we can create an army of people saying, we're looking for more recycled content. We want things that look recyclable. We want things that look that were recycled. We want that. We want that makes change for society. that's what they'll end up getting you. That's you. Every time you buy something, you vote. That's as simple as that. So what we see occurring now is that we have a wave of change. We have a sea of change, and consumers are looking for those products that have heart. And they then come to us, and the brand's like, oh, hold on a second, we're looking for something because consumers are asking, and we see that it's occurring. We can't hire staff. Nobody wants to work for us. I know we've sucked forever, but let us redeem ourselves by making some change. And we're here to receive them.
What is the demand like for the social plastic?
Crazy. We probably have, I would say on average, 10 inquiries a day.
10 a day. Wow. Is the cost of social plastic per ton significantly different then to a virgin plastic?
Well, it's like comparing, like, I'm only going to have a conversation with you because this podcast, I want people to be thinking here, but it's like saying, it's like, oh, is a Toyota more expensive? Is it significantly different than a Bentley? Well, of course it is. They're two totally different things. So, it's hard to compare. Although people want to compare because they're both, materials or this, chemical compound. But, in the end, the way we price our material in a way that actually changes the world because we have to pay the poor enough that they want to go get it. You can't just continue to diminish people. You can't say, oh, we should pay as little as possible. Well, you always do what you've always done. You'll always get what you've always got. Like you can't, you've got it. Something has to change. And it's because the low price of petroleum, the low price of that's ultimately, causing additional degradation in the environment. You can't go to the poor and say, hey, pick up 1,000 little sachets and we'll give you 5 pennies. It's a kilo. Every sachet is a gram. You want them to pick up 1,000 individual pieces of plastic so that you can give them 5 cents? Get stuffed. You want them to go and collect, dozens and dozens or hundreds and hundreds of bottles for pennies? Get stuffed. That just degrades society. It creates recycling as a poverty trap. Nothing changes with that. So what has to change is we have to create incentives that the collectors actually have food. They can actually live. They don't have to have their children employed because they don't have enough money for food. They actually have some hope. They have the ability to save a little bit, have an insurance product, be able to be a part of society where they can now start thinking of other people. So we advocate for appropriate pricing. It's not like 5 times more. It's not 2 times more. It's 30% more. Big deal. Big deal because your package itself, you're paying a couple of dollars a kilo for your bottles. So your bottle itself maybe is only costing you 5 or 6 pennies. You're afraid to pay to have an additional 1 penny cost on the bottle that you sell for $4. Stop it. Stop it, everybody. Come on. And use it as an additive if you need. Add 30%, 40%, 50%, 10%. I don't care. Just start using a material that actually helps the society, the world transform and awake.
Yeah. Well, hey, you're preaching to the choir here. I was one of those guys in the supermarket staring off saying, can you put that meat in my Tupperware box, please? And they'd look at me like I was like mentally unwell. And but you know what? Slowly but surely, the shops have changed. They've changed. Yeah.
I see them. I've seen, which shop was it locally that said, I maybe pre-COVID, I don't know, but bring in your container and we'll put everything in your container.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're right. Absolutely. But it saves them money too.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It's a virtuous circle and it makes a lot of sense. But you know what? That brings to mind because there's a big movement in fintech at the moment, and insurance for that matter, where, startups are coming up and they're trying to figure out a way to connect with their customers, right? And if you take banking for example, you can now spend for about £25,000, you can get something called a bank in a box. So you go to a company, they provide you all of the infrastructure and the banking necessities that you have to start a bank. Can you believe it? And it's 25 grand. And what's happening is it's like this commoditization of these otherwise what we used to think of being very, very expensive, experiences. And so increasingly, the Greta generation that we talk about and others who care are saying, well, what identity do I get with that product that I buy? Actually, does it help me be the person I want to be? And, it's like I'm wearing Patagonia here. People can't see it if you're not looking at the thing, but I'm wearing Patagonia because the book, when I read Yvon Chouinard's book, Let My People Go Surfing, and what they mean. It just blew my mind. And I thought, that's when I wear this jumper, not only is it keeping me warm, but it also keeps me warm in like a sense of my soul. Like I feel like I'm part of a solution, a company that cares, that's recycling. And it's the same with financial services. And they're doing this idea now much more. There's a couple that come to mind, like Tree Card, who signed up, I think, even before they launched their product, they signed up 120 odd thousand customers because every time you spent $60 with your credit card, they used the interchange rate to plant a tree. And it was this idea of shifting the sense of what this purchase means. And I think that's what you tapped into a long time ago. And that's why I'm fascinated to see how it continues. This growth continues. So I wonder about that. What is the thing that you've envisaged for Plastic Bank going forward? What are the things that are going to help you do more and go further?
The way that the value is revealed in the eyes of the consumer, whether they be in the emerging market or not. The gamification and incentivization. You see, it's not the dollars or the pennies that the collector gets, but it's what it provides that is the value. So, for instance, like school tuition, when families return plastic to pay for school tuition, it's not the plastic or the $20, but it's the end of poverty that is the paradigm. The end of poverty, that makes it plastic priceless. How do you value the end of poverty in a family that didn't have the ability to have their children go to school before? It's priceless. Or like insurance products, like which I love. We want to add more and more to that so that, what is peace of mind to you? What is the ability to know that you won't be destitute if something happens to the income earner of the family? It's priceless. For us, we continue to need to find more of that incentive. Every region has its ability to capture the attention of the society. For us, it's about not collectors, but the individual household. So what we're endeavoring to do right now is we're going into Cameroon is understanding how much material is coming into the average household on a monthly basis between paper, aluminum, plastic, and other material resources. So we have an understanding what value is that, and then what can we leverage with that value? Let's say it's $2 a month. So $2 a month, wow, what can I get? What can I provide of value that would way far exceed the $2 of value of material? And those are things like banking, financial inclusion, insurance, education, communications. What kind of basic earned income can I provide to society? That the only thing you need to do is return the materials that come into your house that would have otherwise been viewed as waste. That's the endeavor. Every single household, no matter where you are in the world.
That's how you grow, by getting that desire for the process of recycling, the desire, the value of exchange in the product you provide.
Like I would never even consider throwing my plastic away. No one touch it, because that's what gives me my insurance. That's what allows us to have communications. That's what allows me to have the ability to borrow money. That's what allows me to have a sense of worth in the planet. That is my material.
I
don't throw it away. I wouldn't burn it. That'd be ridiculous.
What I feel when I hear you say that, though, is like as a consumer, and I'm wandering the aisles my local supermarket is something called Waitrose, and most people who in Britain know it's kind of the posh supermarket, and I love it there, right? Because I love going shopping there; it feels great. But and I go in there, but I think to touch a product that has your plastic in, that I can go, my God, this might have helped somebody send their kid to school, or get health insurance when they broke their leg. They're not destitute.
Right.
That for me is what I would love to feel a bit more. That's a story I think that needs to be told more. I mean, it's one of the reasons I got you here, because I think I want to spread this story further.
It's coming. Like we're even with we're with one of the world's largest car manufacturers with their new electric line, where we're going to be in the seating of the vehicle. So they found fishing netting for the floor mats, and then social plastic for the seat.
Fantastic.
So the consumer has the ability to choose it, and they've powerfully made it an option so that people that want to choose that say, oh, I choose sustainability, I choose regeneration, I choose saving the ocean. And they can drive that and feel amazing about that car. Electric vehicle as well.
Yeah.
So that was the intention. It's coming slower than I thought, but I recognized at first that I'd build a brand and that my customers would then promote us. They would share the story. So we don't spend any on advertising. We just let their customer do it. And then there's earned media because the story is powerful. We just collected our first billion bottles, 1,000 million bottles, 1,000 million. Think of all the hands that had to go into that, everything else that had to occur, every interaction, every transaction, every digital transaction, all of the application that we've had to continue building out, and it's still got a long way to go. All the supply chain, all the collectors, all of the people, all of the lives, all of the money.
Wow.
Billion bottles, and it's only like something like 16 hours or 17 hours of consumption, human consumption. We go through 1 million bottles a minute. It took us a year, or it took us a lot longer than that to collect the billion.
That is an incredible number. And you talk about many hands making and touching those products and bringing them together. And that, one of the things, the purpose of Talent Equals, this show, is to explore this idea of talent and like what talent means. And because I recruit people, I spend all of my time building teams of people who are trying to do great things. And, I've come to realize that, if you want to do something significant, you're going to have great people around you to help you achieve those things. And so I sort of wonder, when you've got a purpose-driven business like you have, it must be so much easier to connect with those people. But I suppose what I was just wondering, building Plastic Bank and, building your team in, I think you're in Canada, but then you've got them all over the world as well now, right? Are there sort of values or that you've identified as being universal in sort of the high-performing people you bring into your business? And do you focus on values when you bring them in? Tell me a bit about the way that you...
We focus on values. I'm a values-led organization. I wrote an unpublished book called Context, which is just that, about the values and about manifesting the destiny of any organization by powerfully choosing which actions, being the consideration that values are verbs. Values are verbs, they're actions. What actions would we have to be in the continuous execution of to lead us to success? And so for us, it's, there's a double entendre, because I paint a story with it. It's to gather together. It's like, certainly it's to gather the material, but for us, it's to be the conduit where the world comes together. So when we can connect our brands together, the brands and ultimately end up connecting the consumers together. As we connect them, that powerful change helps them gather the material from the environment. So our emphasis in the organization, certainly as a sales organization, we need to continue collecting people, gather the world together, go find more people, find more people, find more people, find more people, find more collectors, find more people, gather together. It's what we do on a daily basis. The entire organization as a sales organization as we must be. And so it speaks of that. And then there's this, to reveal, so to reveal, like to reveal the human, to reveal the value. And it talks about how we then have that story on the package and the brand. How do we reveal the value of the material in such a way that it's not viewed as waste anymore? How do I value the human then that also participated in revealing the value in the material? So that's the nucleus of it. So how do we continue to evolve as a marketing and communications company where we can reveal stories and add more people feel connected to what we do? That's the retention. Find customers, keep them. And then, I get to the best for last to answer the question, but then becoming, which I add as a paradigm, as I took away from this very moment that I had the idea of the company, this becoming, I only get to become the person. So I create this space for people to be in execution. So for us, it's about, the best of the enemy of the good enough. And if you're in an organization where people are afraid to make mistakes, you're just building dysfunction, because then people are covering the rest. You're not learning from your mistakes. You're not sharing. People aren't trying. There's not enough risk. It's not coming out fast enough. And we need urgency. So becoming speaks to all of that and the individual themselves. Now, when I add that becoming, which ultimately is a growth mindset. So growth mindset with the last value, which is the verb of love, to do for people, to serve people. So when we truly are in the infinite space of love, which is a space that occurs from being out here, not in our own mind, but coming out into the infinite space and being able to work and serve people. So when we're truly serving, I'm serving the brands, and I'm serving consumers, I'm serving the collectors, I'm serving the material, I'm serving the supply chain, I'm serving my staff, I'm serving the world, then we're in this place of abundance. So we're in this place of service with a growth mindset. How do we always get better at that? How do I get better all the time? Who am I in the world? And so everyone in the organization, their role is to replace themselves. So because we're growing so quickly, your role is to be in such a way that your role ultimately is easily filled. So you create the methodology, you create the systemization, you create whatever else is required. We agree on the KPIs so that you can then transition. You need to become with us. And so when you're a growth mindset and you're curious and you're really smart and you're looking for solution all the time and you're looking to implement those solutions, then the company miraculously kind of shows up. I don't answer questions for people. I'm not there. Sometimes it's in a discussion, but rarely. Or people come to me with a question, I just ask a question back. If I keep answering things, I diminish them. There's no becoming when I tell you what to do. So I've got to create the space for people to show up, to be self-actualized.
So how do you do that? How do you create that space? Because that's easier said than done, my friend David. That is like, I'll create a space for you. I mean, I know from my experience of recruiting people is like this, I think inherently, I never want to say there's a bad person, because I think, we get too easily locked into this idea of saying, I've got a great candidate for you. And so the opposite of that, I've got a bad candidate. This person's a bad person.
Right.
And even toxic people are just probably making the wrong choices, and they're just doing the wrong thing. So
they're in their own ego mind. They're scared, or want to be liked or not be dismissed or whatever it might be.
But when you get those people who are, let's sort of characterize them as maybe being troubled or bad. I'm going to use the wrong phrase.
There are people who are presently not doing societally acceptable things, or corporate, but they're just people, and they have the ability to become again all the time.
Yeah.
Now I will love all of them. I just don't need to hire them when they're in that state.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you open that space then for them, David? What's some of the
So how do you identify that person? How do you bring in those people? How do you identify that someone has so I love the question. I'll ask you, so Will, tell me about the books in your personal development library.
Okay. Well, here's one that sits on my desk with me all the time. And this one is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This is the Gregory Hayes one. That's one of.
I'm sure you've got a whole library.
That I've got some behind me as well. One of the other ones is poetry. David White. The Bell and the Blackbird. This is one of my favorites.
Okay, where else do you go for learning? And what are you learning currently? See, these are my questions.
Yeah.
Tell me what books your personal development library, and if they look at me like what, like what? Well, why would I? Then obviously you're not a learning, curious person. You need to be curious. You need to be seeking knowledge, seeking what you don't know. You need to be in the place of thinking, I don't know yet.
Does that mean I would have sailed through your interview, David, if I would have pulled out 25?
The follow-up question is, it's fantastic. Tell me about what you did with what you learned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me how you applied it in your life. That's different, because knowing and not doing is like not knowing. So I don't care if you read, but what did you do? How did you transform? How did you change? Show me those times in life. Give me those moments of your life where you had a paradigm shift and you became new again. That's what I look for, because those people, I take John Maxwell, author of Leadership. Most companies hire people for what they know and then fire them for who they are. Truth.
Yeah, I think in one of my favorite books actually with Ray Dalio and Principles, and he talked about Bridgewater realizing very, very quickly that competencies, skills, were the least strong indicator whether or not that they would fit the organization.
Exactly.
And I'm working on a book on this very topic about values and motivations-based recruitment. And I found that, yes, it's one thing. You were absolutely right to talk about competencies, talk about their current understanding of the world, like what they've developed so far. But what's really more interesting to me is the way they see the world through their values, because that's a better indicator on what they're going to do in the future, right? If I lead with humility and integrity, then when I see a problem in an organization, I'm much more likely to put my hand up and go, that's not right. And I'm much more likely to then behave in the right way that we want them to behave. And you talked about it, have a growth mindset because of that.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that's really misunderstood. And maybe when we're in organizations that feel a bit uncomfortable talking about values because they're not values-led organizations or purpose-driven businesses, it's much more difficult to talk about. And that's prevalent in banking, and I think in insurance as well, because it almost seems a little bit, because a lot of things you're saying to me, David, could be seen as being a bit alternative, talking about actualization, on realization, on becoming. But these are like ancient philosophies, right?
They're ancient philosophies. They're principles. They're principles.
Yeah.
It's not a fad, for Pete's sakes. Totally.
Yeah.
I think that we wound up in a place in society where we began communicating that we need to spend our way out of the hardships of war or wherever it began, and we began to attach our sense of value in that we had, that we acquired, not in who we are. And so people began racing for a thing, and we lost sight of who and why. So, there's 1,000 reasons behind it. I don't know. I only some conjecture, but I know that in my organization, people are profoundly touched and inspired into action. And they love working with us, and they love the change, and they get to witness the change, and we share those stories, and they participate in the stories, and they see, the lives of collectors who are improving, and we get those words of encouragement all of the time. I work 14 hours a day. That's not, but I hesitate on the word, I had this conversation that, it's not work. It's just, I'm just in action all the time. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful, man. I thoroughly appreciate what you guys are doing in fighting this good fight. I feel that as well, like the stories that you've told so far, and building an organization for people where they can feel purpose-driven. That has got to be one of the greatest achievements for any entrepreneur, where they can look at the people around them and feel like they're getting a satisfied life through the work that they're doing.
And it's totally possible for everyone. Everyone has the opportunity to do it. You're spending the same amount of time being selling, Scotch tape, colored Scotch tape. At the time, we only have that. We only have the present moment. You can decide where you want it to be.
Yeah.
And I would say that there's a different paradigm when we want to serve others, when you actually set out with the intention, like, oh, I'm going to go serve as many people as I can and build abundance in the world. It's a different paradigm than saying, oh, I'm going to sell tape at 20 cents less than my competitors because there's not enough money to go around. And so, so I'm going to try to win the market by having people spend less, or something crazy like that, which is all scarcity focused. The world needs is more of an abundance mindset.
I agree. Can I ask you then, sort of as we wrap towards the end of our show, and I'm very thankful for your time with us today, and could you just tell us a bit about how you sort of maintain your own well-being? Like what are some of the things you do?
Meditation, exercise. And now I'm no sugar, no caffeine, no alcohol, no gluten.
Oh my God.
Which makes no fun.
So I say plastic free. I've done alcohol free as well, but not it's sugar. So is that like a ketogenic diet that you're sort of after there, or is it?
No. It's just that I'm trying to maintain I want to increase the quality of my sleep. And inflammation, and because I exercise so much as a youth. I'm 52 and I'm waiting for a double hip replacement.
Oh my God.
So so that, and then my shoulders are a mess and my knees are a mess, and so my body's inflamed, so I'm trying to fight that too. So sugar. And then on top of that, by the way, this conversation has to be said. Look at all of the packaging. Look at all of the degradation in the environment in the ocean. Look at all the bottles, all of the crisp packets. What do you think is the most common ingredient in all of them? Inside, not the package, but what was inside the package. Sugar. Sugar is as big. We've become addicted to the degradation of self and the environment. So highly addictive. Look at all the package. It is as big of a contributor to the environmental degradation as it is to the degradation of our health. Do you want to help save the planet? Give up sugar.
Yeah, man. Do you know what? I think I don't think we realize what sugar is actually doing in all of its forms. And I think I'm dyslexic, and I'm also I think I'm ADD. I've not had it diagnosed, but maybe that's just maybe me. Just I'm someone who I'm a bit all over the place sometimes. I have found though, in my own experience, as I've cut sugar out of my diet, that my God, like my level drops. Like I'm much more calm and focused and clear. And my wife will say exactly the same. And to that point, I think we are. I think absolutely right. I mean, sugar is, from a health point of view, from a well-being point of view, many people could learn the price that you pay with a high sugar, high carbohydrate diet, and what you can unlock in yourself if only you sort of can learn a bit of restraint. If you ask me how I've applied the stuff from Stoicism, it would be this idea of some action and some restraint. Learn how to sometimes cut stuff out to actually get more in.
When you're in the midst of the addiction,
very difficult. Yeah, I hear that actually, and I still struggle with it. Sugar, alcohol.
Caffeine.
Yeah, absolutely, everything. Caffeine. I love coffee. I drink loads of it. But yeah, it's all of these things, right?
Oh, that was a big hack too. Like I drink loads too, but just caffeinated, decaf rather now. Right. So and it was the first week that I understood how fatigued I was and what caffeine was doing. Now I wake up and even if I'm tired and I've only had a few hours sleep, I'm still totally functional. Yeah, I feel foggy, but I'm not depleted without caffeine. I highly recommend giving up caffeine. Oh my goodness. That is the most widely circulated central nervous stimulant in society. Oh my goodness. So highly addictive as well. Like, give it a week, give up sugar, I've had profound impact in my life.
I could definitely recommend for your information if you could try a ketogenic diet. It's something I actively, and I fast as well. I don't know if you do any fasting as part of your routine. But I'm now, as I'm getting older, I'm 40, turned 40 this year, feeling the aches and pains of, sort of getting a little bit older. And I'm finding a regular fast is actually helping a lot of that. So, cool. My final question, closing question for you, and I would be remiss if I didn't do this for the audience. Two questions, but if people listening, in the audience are out there in the big world of financial services or big corporations, are looking a way that they could help you, what they could come and serve you and help in this mission, what could they do, and who would you like to reach out to you? And please ask whatever people could do to help.
Well, listen, it's not an institution. Institutions are just groups of people. So what are the people who work in those organizations? Now that they're a consumer, number one, of course, they're immensely powerful. They can walk into any stores. We communicate and demand regenerative products, regenerative packaging. They make a commitment. They understand that every time they buy something, they vote for it. They'll continue to produce what you're voting for. The world requires us to be a powerful movement that demands change. That's a human, no matter if you're at your home or in your office, for sure. There's so much. You're so powerful as a consumer, immensely powerful. So be aware of the power that you have to influence and affect change. Powerful. Now, the organization itself, within banking, like Lombard Odier, the Swiss bank that partnered with us, they can't use material, but they direct funds towards us. They take their management fees. And when we circulate them through our ecosystems, last year was almost $1 million contribution.
Wow.
And so we've created bursaries. We give scholarships to children. So we put countless more children in school, and the family returns plastic to pay for it. And ultimately what it does is it cuts down the tuition like in half. Or the paradigm of that, the other side of that is that the plastic is now worth twice as much. So now it's like, oh, hold on a second. We only have to collect a very small amount of plastic. That means the plastic is worth dollars to us. So true diamonds. So that's one way too.
Yeah.
So there's no end of engagement. There's no end of being able to communicate us, talk about us, have people know that social plastic is a category that they need to use us. You go to the website, go to plasticbank.com, enroll, be a part of our movement. Now, on all of this, we're still a startup. Like, it's been an 8-year startup. We're in the tens of millions in revenue, which is beautiful, but there's so much for us to do. So we're still learning as we go. There's still finesse. There's, the newsletter could be better, this, that, and the other, but we're making things on the ground. That's what I'm focused on.
Yeah, don't worry about the newsletter so much. Keep doing your good work. I'll say to the audience listening, I mean, I've contributed to Plastic Bank, and you can, as a smaller organization or as a large organization, come in and give some money, and then that helps, as you've just illuminated, to sort of basically subsidize the price or improve the price, as you said. Right. So improve the price for the plastic. So please, people, if you're listening out there in an organization and you're trying to do something for Earth Day, or you've done something for Earth Day previously and you're trying to do something in the office, then if you go to bank site, you can see this stuff, right? And you can sort of contribute as a group or as an organization or whatever you want it to be. And then I'm going to be leading here, David. So like, I know that I've introduced to you some people in the microinsurance area as well. And if there's anybody else in that space, then that might make sense, right?
Yeah. More banking, more everything else for sure. Tons there. And thank you for being you and creating this conversation. And even being in the conversation that in your authenticity of being plastic free and the struggles with it. And more people need to know that as well. It's a beautiful conversation. It creates the space. It allows people to make mistake as well. So thank you for everything you're doing. So acknowledge you powerfully. It's really beautiful.
Thank you, David.
Nice to meet
you. God
you.
knows I'm good at making mistakes, so I can embrace that one. And I'm gonna finish up with my final question, because I don't feel like I've finished my podcast right if I don't ask you this one. Okay. I mean, I always ask like 3 books that you love, or any books that you love, but I gotta feel like you've asked me, so I would love what you're working on at the moment. Anything you enjoy?
Man, I continue annually reread The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Oh, really? Okay.
If you've not been through that, man, that is principle-centered life. That is, Plastic Bank is based on the principles of the 7 Habits.
Highly effective.
No question.
It's something you reread regularly.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So powerful. Such an important book. Oh my goodness. One of the books that brought me awakening was Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul. So I add that as well in the consciousness and the journey of it all.
Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul.
The Untethered Soul.
So what's that about?
Yeah. Consciousness, awakening. Ultimately, it's for what was there for me was that it gave me the awareness that I'm not my thoughts. And that most of us walk around thinking that we're our thoughts, but we're not. We're the ones who hear the thoughts. You're not the thought itself. You're the one who hears the thought. There's such a distinction between the two. And when you believe the thoughts to be you, that's where angst and pain and suffering exist.
I heard a great quote to that effect, which was, "Don't believe everything you think." And
totally. No, you don't believe any of it because they're just thoughts.
Absolutely. Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul.
Michael Singer, yeah.
Beautiful, man.
And then I'd stay in that realm because I think that my success in business has come from consciousness. And so I would talk about Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. It just as in my wisdom of life. And so Michael as well gave me meditation. That's where I was like, oh, meditation, what? Yeah, I remember being an entrepreneur, maybe about 13 years ago. And I was at a seminar where there was this fellow who sold his business for $500 million. And it was like, oh, wow. And the question was, well, what do you attribute that to? And he said, meditation. I'm like, what? Like, that's totally woo-woo. What do you mean meditation? But it's stuck. And I was like, meditation? Okay, hold on. There's some secret in meditation. I'm totally curious. I'm like, okay, what's in that? So it took me a number of years to get to that. But I discovered that in my meditation, that's where life shows up. And what I owe to the world is to spend time in consciousness to find space outside of thought. And the more I do that, the more the world shows up. It's immensely powerful. It's inexplainable to me. But
yeah, it's hard.
And then I'm going through the Torah, the Old Testament.
That's beautiful as well. So the Old Testament of Torah, like getting some old wisdom, right? And seeing
totally so much.
Like, oh my God, people knew shit before we thought we did. There we go.
Totally. Amazing. Totally. What? People wanted for thousands of years? What?
Yeah, I feel that when I read Marcus Aurelius, this meditations and Buddhism and anything like that. You're like, oh wow. So people had it figured out for quite a while. We've just forgotten it, right? Somewhere along the way, we got wrapped up in our Rolexes and our iPhones and our all that jazz.
The ego doesn't want us to be happy. That's what I learned from Michael Singer. The ego does not want us to be happy. It's threatened. It dies in your joy. Yeah. The ego mind survives in your pain. And if you're on the precipice of joy, like in a good relationship or other things, you start to, you manifest its destruction. It's the ego mind because it dies. It's fighting for survival. And so much of what we just talked about was the ego mind's fighting for survival. It wants to discount all of those other beautiful gifts.
You know what? I will close it down. And I've heard that story in The War of Art. It's a great book. I think Stephen Prestefield, I think it is. But he talks about fear and how when you're an artist, that fear and that center is on it. And David White speaks also about how fear and resistance is actually because when we're doing wonderful things, it comes usually from a very vulnerable place. And that sort of that vulnerability is where we start to fear because there's something at stake. We feel there's something at stake. So I really feel what you're talking about there. Well, look, David, I've thoroughly enjoyed our time together, and talking about the things that we have. And I would encourage anybody who's interested to find out more about Plastic Bank to look you up on LinkedIn. Are you using things like Twitter and other channels?
Yeah, I find that some of them are more relevant than others. I haven't seen a lot of value in Twitter yet, but they can. But I'm always available at david@plasticbank.com. Happy to share that. LinkedIn for sure, Facebook, Instagram. All of those things are nice if people want to have communications, but more importantly, I want them to go to a store and make change. I don't want you to spend time emailing me. I want you to go and make change and invite your friends and be authentic and be the leader that the society needs you to be as well, and go create the space, just like picking up litter. It's not picking up litter, it's having other people see you pick up the litter that creates the space for them to do the same. Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your work in the world, and all the things you shared with us today. I definitely feel like you're a brother from another mother. And so I'd like to thank you again. And I wish you all of the success with Plastic Bank. So thank you, David.
Beautiful. Thanks, Paul. Thank you for being you. Thank you.
Before you leave, I wanted to tell you about Exige International, which is our executive search business, which helps leading firms in the fintech and insurtech world find outstanding talent. Without your support as clients of Exige, we wouldn't be able to make the Talent Equals show. So if you need outstanding talent to help build your business, then please reach out to our team here at Exige. You'll not only secure great people, but through our 10% donation of revenue, we'll help secure the future of our planet's most precious habitats. So thank you, and see you again on the Talent Equals podcast.